Phil, that was Anna Yusin, Dr. Anna Yusin. And one thing, I mean, her Stanford, Yale, I mean, this woman is very, very significantly credentialed. And
Yes.
not the first person to incorporate spiritual practice into her psychiatric practice, but certainly somebody that is popularizing it even more. Her
Yeah.
book, I think, will have that effect. And I'm in New York now, and you're in Los Angeles, and I know, I mean, if somebody wants to get psychiatric help, any type of counseling from a healthcare professional, and they want meditation or something along those lines, it's a heck of a lot easier now than it was in 1975. Because if you said the
Well,
word meditation back then, people would assume you needed psychiatric help. Would you agree?
well, I agree, and I would add that in 1975 it was a whole lot easier than in 1965 or
Right.
1968
Or
when these things first.
1955, you would have got the
Yeah,
McCarthy
right.
era. They would have gone after you. Yeah.
No, but it's funny you should say 1975 because by then there were a lot there was a lot of research already done at least on
Right.
TN on transcendental meditation, and there was a cover story in Time magazine in 1975 about TM and its how it's being used by psychiatrists, and people were getting off of Valium and
Right.
tranquilizers and all that.
But it's taken a
So
while. And
it start
I also remember Dr. Charles Gluck at the Hartford
yes.
Institute of Living in Connecticut, very highly regarded psychiatrist, was one of the first to use TM with great success with psychiatric patients. And I think now yoga, meditation, all of these things are very much a part of many, many folks' psychiatric practice. And Dr. Ustin is really Yusim,
Yusim.
rather, is really leading the one of the people leading the charge at this point. Especially
Yeah,
somebody, as you know, she's definitely not considered somebody on the periphery of psychiatry because of she's so comes from some such a traditional background. Even worked with a neurophysiologist and has approached it from every angle. What's also interesting with her is she's not promoting one type of spiritual practice, but really
that's
she
right.
works with the. And I would imagine somebody says, "Well, I'm Jewish and I've always been interested in the Kabbalah and Kabbalistic tradition. Let me look at that." If somebody, I like something that's totally secular. I don't want anything with any Hindu trace to it. Or another person, hey, I'm open to anything. So I think that that's helpful in that I think, especially when you get into spiritual practices, people can be sensitive about what practices they participate in.
Yeah, and it's not just meditative practices, but
Mm,
it's psychiatrists and psychotherapists have been open to the fact that people's religious life, their spiritual approach to their lives, all that is relevant to how they adapt to the world and how
mm-hmm.
happy they are and how fulfilled they are. And for many years, that was considered irrelevant in the
Right,
psychological community because it was very Freudian or very
right,
behaviorist. But after the 60s, things changed. So a lot of people, there's been a lot of good research on the
right,
role of just even conventional
right,
religion and ordinary sort of mainstream spirituality on people's health and people's well-being, and how to help people construct a more meaningful and happy spiritual life, as opposed to, in fact, we mentioned this to Dr. Yusim that when you have an unhealthy spiritual life, it could be detrimental to your
right,
health and your
right.
well-being. So,
Right. I was in graduate school in 1971. I think it was in clinical psychology, and it was program was Freudian based, but touched upon a number of different areas. And boy, and I had started TM the year before, and when I attempted to bring in any of these concepts, there wasn't a lot of receptivity for it. Carl Jung, who came right after Freud and was very much influenced by him, he got into some spiritual
Oh
aspects
yeah.
of this. He opened it up in terms of actual practice. If I had said I want to, I actually left graduate school to go become a teacher of TM because I felt I could help people more that way, and it was not something that was fully embraced by the people I was studying, not just with the people I was studying with. They
To
just thought
put
it
it
was from left
mildly.
field. There was no integrating the two. And really, I think today, maybe not in every program in every school and all, but I think for the most part, it would be well received and encouraged in most any program.
Yeah. And I've spoken, especially when I was researching American Veda, I spoke to a lot of mental health professionals, both MDs, psychiatrists, and clinical psychologists and psychotherapists, and they all have this sense that spirituality is an integral part of people's lives.
Hmm.
And it's not the sort of future of an illusion of the Freudian model of the past. So, we know a lot more from just a pure research
Hmm.
perspective
Now, Phil,
on how to help people do that.
You're writing a biography on Paramahansa Yogananda. Does he talk about mental health or psychiatry as it existed during his period in the United States,
Yeah,
anyway?
that's a good question. He certainly was like the gurus who came 30, years after he did, or 40, was aware of the need to speak to Americans in their own language and in their own uh, idiom, and address their own needs. So he used the language that we think of as psychology, but not in a formal sense, or like using jargon or anything.
Hmm.
But he talked about being happy. He talked about ridding yourself of bad habits. He talked about the power of the mind. He talked about the subconscious. So I think he was influenced by the breakthroughs in our understanding of the mind in the West, and he kind of used that language to some degree. But pretty much everything I saw him address, it wasn't, there's parallels in the East, and that's a fascinating thing. If you look at the yogic texts, um, where they talk about things like how important the mind is, how important it is to sort of do what we think of as positive thinking, but there's yogic terms for that, and replacing damaging thoughts and emotions with positive ones. There are parallels in the yogic literature to certain methods that psychotherapists would
Hmm.
use. I find that very interesting.
Right.
So the language might have been psychologized for Yogananda as it was
Hmm.
for many of the gurus who came later. But conceptually, it was very consistent with,
Right.
you know,
I mean, this is subject matter we should delve into more deeply in future
yeah,
interviews, and also another area to get into, not now, but in the future, is just a big part of Western mental health care is from the pharmacies, from
yeah,
pharmaceuticals, and obviously that's being tremendously overused and abused. But as Dr. Yusim said, I mean, there's a place for it. So
yep.
for future interviews.
Okay.
Phil, till
Yes,
next
sir.
time.
Okie dokie.
Dennis from New York and Phil from Los Angeles. Today, anyway. We could be anywhere.
Okay.
All right, next time.
Have
Bye.
fun.